Right, round three of the BattleTech Irish Nationals. Oof, where do I begin with this one? I guess I should begin with the mechs. So my mech picks are the Grim Reaper, a 4-3, and the Thug, also or I should say the Grim Reaper was a 3-4, my apologies, and the Thug was a 4-3. And with those, we have a Thug, which is just a very powerful mech, 2 PPCs, a couple SRMs, and really very few weaknesses overall. Tons of armor, 250 armor, 80 tons, just an absolute beast of a machine. Very similar to an Awesome if you haven't played against a Thug before. And then in terms of the Grim Reaper, I would probably classify this as more a medium support mech. It has some LRMs, large laser, extended range. Just very good kind of range mech, which provides good support for the Thug. Now, my opponent, on the other hand, also chose a Thug, but he chose the 3-4 Thug. And so he was actually outgunning me with that Thug. And then he chose the Buccaneer, so they kind of come in a pair in your various mech picks. And with the Buccaneer, that's 3-4 Buccaneer, and in this case, we're looking at one it's just covered in medium lasers, has a hatchet, and my opponent's intent, which he told me after the game, was he really, really wanted to use that hatchet in close combat. But this obviously contradicts my own tactica going into the event, which is that I was going to target the weaker of the two mechs, stick together, blow up that mech, and then move on to the next. Now, the issue I had, though, was this particular opponent was very good at using his mechs, and one tactic that I've always struggled with is, if you can imagine, there's a massive hill and you have an Awesome sitting on top of it, and there's no real place to hide in terms of elevation. He's on the maximum elevation, so it doesn't matter where you stand, you can at least see your torso and your head, and he just keeps pelting you with PPC shots, and you try to get closer to the Awesome, and he just kicks your head off from the difference in elevation. You can't go on the same elevation as him, and even when you get there, there's not much you can do with him. He's got so much armor, and you've got other concerns to worry about, other bodyguard mechs to worry about. Well, that's exactly describing this game as well, because when dealing with a Thug, like I said, it's very similar in terms of play to an Awesome, and he found the only level 3 elevation on the map in the corner with a forest on it as well. I can't remember if it was a heavy or a light, but it really didn't matter, because this, no matter where I stood on the board, this mech had complete domination in terms of range attacks. Likewise, I had a Thug myself, so it's not like I could outrange the individual, and we only had an hour and a half to play, so I didn't really want to play the range game because that would be really bad for both of our scoring. So I wanted to play aggressively, try to get as much points as I can, move forward. Even though my mechs did have some capability there just to go for range, they had bad cover anyway, and I'm generally quite an aggressive wargamer anyway, so I decided I'm going in for this. I'm not going to sit around plinking all day. That's not what I came here to do. I came here to make some memorable games at the event, and from there, my opponent wanted to backline his Thug and move in for combat with the Buccaneer. But because I was targeting the Buccaneer, what ended up happening was he was frustrated because, essentially I had frustrated his Buccaneer because he was forced to move back and to retreat and leave his Thug isolated, and effectively retreat the Buccaneer back into a set of forests and plink away at me with medium lasers, because I was just putting so much damage into his Buccaneer that he could not engage any closer, and he just had a little bit more speed on my mechs and a little bit more distance, and he just kind of kept himself out just a little bit out of range, trying to optimize the modifiers for range and being in the forest and all that kind of stuff. And I think we were both surprised that the Buccaneer didn't go down sooner. It took a ton of damage, but it didn't go down. And the longer that I'm spending on the Buccaneer is more free PPC shots from the Thug going into my mechs. So this was a level of stress that my Grim Reaper really couldn't take. And so it lost like one of its main armaments. It lost losing a lot of different armor. And the one thing that really caught me by surprise was when its right torso came off. And my opponent pointed out that it's got 3 extra large fusion engine components in the right torso. And for anyone new to BattleTech, if you take 3 engine hits, your mech is automatically destroyed. So the second I lost my right torso, which was not that unlikely to happen, because at the end of the day, both my torso sides had like 20 armor each. Then going into criticals, it didn't take a lot of damage for this to happen, and I was taking an awful lot of damage every turn from those PPCs, because that was a mech that was just sitting there being undisturbed effectively, because there was very little I could do to deal with it. And this really tore down my Grim Reaper. And like I said, I feel like the Grim Reaper probably let me down a little bit too early, because if it weren't for the extra large fusion engine, I think I would have taken out the Buccaneer before the Grim Reaper went down. And then we get into the latter stage of the game. We're probably like 2/3 of the way through the game. And at this point, the Buccaneer is being very cautious, because he can't afford a full-on frontal assault on him anymore, because he has taken too much damage. Likewise, my Thug has kind of tanked a lot of damage from the opposing Thug. And as powerful and difficult as the opponent's Thug was to destroy, mine was equally as powerful and difficult to destroy. Because you have a mech here with 250 armor. PPC, even if you have 2 of them, does 10 damage. So on average, you're probably only going to get hit with 1 of those. That's 10 damage a turn. So you're looking at, in total, the thing could last like literally 24 turns. It could last maybe on average 15 turns of the game. And you just, in a tournament setting, you do not have that amount of time to deal with such a powerful mech. So my opponent's strategy was not working. I was at a modifier disadvantage. I was losing a lot more armor, but it was also obvious that my opponent was not getting the result they wanted either. So it was a very difficult match for both of us, I think. And what swayed it really was that as my opponent was pelting loads of PPCs over the course of the game into my Thug, I had occasionally took some hits in the head, some SRMs, various attacks, maybe falling over from 20 plus damage, getting a double PPC shot and so on. So I'd actually taken 3 pilot hits at this point. And once you hit 4 pilot hits, according to the tournament rules, and I don't necessarily disagree because you're already quite close to death at that point anyway. Once you hit your 4th hit on the pilot, the mech is classified as being destroyed. You can still play it out, but in terms of points, it's classed as being destroyed. So not only was my Grim Reaper destroyed from the right torso, the 3 engine hits, but in the final turn of the game, my opponent was able to get that last hit on my pilot. So that classified me as a completely 100% destroyed. I hadn't quite finished off the Buccaneer, and his Thug was practically intact. So there was a lot to take away from this particular game, and this was game 3 of 4. So this was and the previous 2 games I'd only taken out 1 mech each, and the lower 2 value mechs. So for me to get a higher ranking, this was a critical game for me to win over. And looking back at it and asking advice from other players, what they advised was to take my LRMs, take my long distance things, and just plink away at the opponent until they're forced to come to me. But there's no guarantee that they would actually do that. And it's not really the way I play. Like, for example, if this was a combined arms situation, I would have sent some soldiers in there, dropped in some soldiers from behind the Thug, tried to do a swarm attack. There would have been different options available to me. But when it's a 2-on-2, and you have the PPC, which isn't really doing enough damage alone, and then for such a large mech, and then even when you get in close, you're talking about physicals, they were in a higher position on the hill, you're kind of at a disadvantage. I would be definitely interested in your feedback on how do you deal with a sort of king of the hill PPC mech on a 2-on-2 situation, because I've thought about this. Of all the games I've played, this is the game I've thought about the most, because I felt like I was really struggling, and whenever I played against an awesome as well in the past, sitting on a hill, I've always struggled that as well, even in bigger games. So there doesn't seem to be a very effective answer, at least mech on mech. So if anyone has advice on what I could have done differently, or how they would have handled the Thug, especially from a more aggressive play standpoint, or if I should have taken different mech picks, maybe chose some mechs that had more missile range to outrange the PPC. But even then, you'll be dealing with +4 modifiers, because even though I outrange the Thug, I'm still dealing at long range. So I'm not sure. I guess if the rounds were quicker, maybe it would balance out, but I'm not sure. And likewise, I had the issue that not only was he on the hill, not only was he in the forest, he had better gunnery than me as well. So I had a lot of problems to deal with there. And like for me personally, this type of game, like there's nothing against my opponent or so on like that, but what I mean is that this type of game comes up often enough that without me to find a solution for it, it actually is taking some of the fun out of BattleTech for me, to deal with these huge energy mechs, high tonnage energy mechs that sit on hills. I just can't think of an effective strategy, and if there is no effective strategy, that does really sap a lot, a huge amount of the tactica and fun I'm having with BattleTech out. It just saps it right out. If there is no straightforward solution to dealing with these type of mechs, and definitely one I need to think about more. And I think what I will do is I probably will play out this particular round again at home using a different strategy, especially if someone in the comments mentions a different strategy. I may give that a go. I'm not big on like tournament prep or doing too much prep for a tournament, but just from a more general holistic BattleTech point of view, dealing with energy mechs, I feel is something I need to practice because I just can't work it out. Theory crafting, I feel like there's something I have to roll out on the dice and figure out through play, because I just don't see how to get through an energy mech right now. But anyway, let's move on to round 4. I'll leave a link here for you.